Hey there, fellow board game enthusiasts. Welcome to the Escape the Board podcast, where we're all about tabletop fun. I'm Connor, and hanging out with me, as always, is my buddy Charles. Get ready to have a blast as we explore the thrilling world of gaming together. Today, we're talking Terraforming Mars. So, this is a game about space exploration.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on space exploration?
Well, I think it's definitely slowed down a lot. I've always been a big fan of space myself. I think it's cool. I wish we'd get out there more. Obviously, a big Star Wars fan, big Star Trek fan. I think it'd be super rad. I'd like to get way, way past our solar system, though. I think Mars is cutting ourselves short.
Definitely getting into the world of science fiction at that point.
Well, that's definitely what we're talking about today anyways.
That is fair.
Science fiction.
And on that note, let's actually dive on in and let's talk about the theme on Terraforming Mars.
Yeah, so the theme is pretty straightforward. Your goal is to head up to Mars and make it habitable for humans to come and settle there. You do play as several different agents of corporations. And the goal is to make sure that there's sufficient water sources to increase the temperature to a livable range and also increase the oxygen levels. So, yeah, I mean, that's the basic concept of the game. Go to Mars, make it livable.
Make it livable for humans. And that being said, this game does a fairly good job at making you feel like you're actually there.
Yeah. They've got a nice wide range of companies that could be sending you up. Like, I know 30, 40 years ago, we were all thinking this was going to be headed up by like NASA or something, right? But as we move further and further, it's becoming clear that companies are the people that are going to be spearheading these kind of projects. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, Bridget Mendler, for those of you that don't know, the star of Good Luck Charlie from Disney, is actually the CEO of a space company now.
Yep.
She started her own space company, and that's just good for her. Good for her.
It's been a little while since I've done any reading on it, but I mean, obviously, Elon Musk had that whole thing about trying to blow up the polar caps on Mars or something to raise the temperature.
Oh, that's fair.
And to make water, like what we're talking about here in the game. But yeah, there's a lot of different corporations in this game that could be sending you up to Mars. You see a lot of variety in the different kind of mentalities of the corporations in what kind of resources they give you.
You've got corporations focused on science, others focused on infrastructure.
There's even one focused on cinematography. Like what? Yeah, there's a movie company that's trying to terraform Mars.
Maybe it's a good place to shoot movies. Who knows?
Probably. That's the new Old West.
All right. So let's move on to like generic thoughts on the game. Just as far as this game goes, what makes it feel real? What makes it feel like a game sort of situation? Like personally, I love the aspects of the cards actually feeling like that's what you're doing. Like, there's cards about planting bushes. There's cards about discovering new lakes as water is created.
Oh, yeah.
And
the cards are very descriptive.
Very, very descriptive.
Yeah.
And it legitimately makes you feel like you are these companies or the workers of these companies terraforming the planet.
What I really love is the system for financing in this game. Like, that sounds like a really stupid thing to say, right? But I just think they put a lot of thought into how it works. The way that you track how much money you've got, because obviously you've got to use money to, build projects and to, run certain kinds of events and stuff, right? But the way that you get money is twofold. You can
make progress in your efforts to terraform.
And what that ends up doing is the more effort that you put into terraforming Mars, there's actually a tracker on the main board. We'll get we'll show that off here in a little bit, but it's called the TR tracker, the terraforming rating, and basically how that translates is the more effort you put into terraforming Mars, the more government funding is being provided to you.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought that was put into that, and not just the financing, but the resource development as a whole.
Yeah. And I'm just saying that the government financing, that's brilliant, because
It is
something that I would expect in real life.
It is a great ode to make it feel like real life.
Exactly.
As far as the art goes, and I absolutely love the artwork on this game. It is gorgeous.
I mean, just looking at the main box here, you can see they put a lot of effort into just the basic art style.
Right. And to me, it almost gives like a watercolor feel with slightly more detail where needed. For those of you watching by video, you can see that the background does look like it was painted by watercolor, but the things that need more detail, such as the ships or the people on the box, are are finely detailed and very clear in the image. It really offers a focal point on the box and draws your eyes in, and it's just so gorgeous to look at.
If I had to take a guess, and I have absolutely no idea, so I'm guessing, I would think that they, first of all, painted this possibly as a full scale canvas, right? Like big old thing. Took a picture of it, digitized it, and then shrunk it down. There's just so much detail in every little bit of it.
I could see that.
And the cards.
Right, the cards. This game, from top to bottom, every card is so detailed, just as detailed as the box.
And unique.
And very unique.
There are over 100 cards easily. They are all very, very unique cards. And like it's obvious that they put so much effort and detail into all of them. If I saw something like this with other games where there's so many different images, I think of like Magic the Gathering, right, where they commission art from different people. That's what I would expect for having so many different good images in a game like this.
Right, but that's not what they did.
Yeah.
It's
the same art
uniform.
Style. It is, yeah. That's
the best word for it.
Yeah,
this game
uniform.
is so uniform from top to bottom. Even the design, even the game pieces feel like they fit within this world, within this game mechanically. It is just so well put together. Any other thoughts for this section, for generic thoughts on the game?
I mean, we started talking a little bit about immersion. I know we kind of talked about how well thought out the companies are. I do have just one little tidbit of thought on how the companies run. Okay. I don't have a better way to make the game work. I think the way that they designed it is the best possible way to make a game. But the one thing that just kind of eats at the back of my mind is, in real life, I think what we would see is some companies kind of getting up there faster than others, right?
Okay.
You would see some kind of spearheading the project, and then others would be slowly lagging behind and catching up. And you'd really see a lot of growth from one or maybe two particular companies that got an early start on it. Right,
but the way this game works, you've got 4 companies all landing simultaneously if you're playing with a full game.
Yep. So I just don't know how much I would believe that. I don't think I would see a lot of collaboration, I guess.
Right.
Between
you just suspend your disbelief just a little bit.
Unless one company was like hiring out another company, obviously, there'd be some collaboration on that. But again, in that situation, you'd see one company kind of taking the forerunner on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree with you there. And I think that pretty much covers everything as far as just general thoughts. Let's kind of move on to the mechanics of what makes this game so great.
And unique.
And very unique. I don't think I've ever played a game identical. I mean, obviously, no game is identical, but for even being an engine builder, this game is unique.
The main, I think, thing that really stood out to me the first time that we opened up this box, really strange, they've got 5 different phases that you can play, right?
Absolutely.
But you don't play all of them every round.
Right, no. So every player at the beginning of every round chooses which phase they want to play. And so if you play 2-player game, you're only playing 2 phases per round.
At best.
At best.
Yeah, if 2 people pick the same phase,
you're only playing 1 phase that round. And even if you have a full game of 4 players, you're playing a max of 4 rounds. And I mean, if you
Out of
caught
5.
out of 5, and if you caught our last episode, you know that doesn't really happen
Once. Through an entire playthrough with 4 people, it happened once that we hit 4 phases.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more about strategy and kind of how to avoid that and use other people to kind of get the phases you need.
Well, and sometimes you don't need to avoid it.
That
Because
is also true.
if it goes both ways. Like, you're like, oh, well, I could really use this phase. But Tyson over there could really use this phase. I'm not going to pick it. Actually, that happened to us at the end.
That's true.
Of the game. Justin he's like, man, I really want to get, this one thing done with this heat that I've got. But what he ended up doing, Tyson didn't pick action.
It's true, because he knew Justin was going to.
No, he had played action the turn before.
Oh, that's
which is a thing. You're not allowed to play the same phase 2 rounds in a row. Same player can't pick the same phase twice in a row.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tyson couldn't take the action phase, and Justin really wanted the action phase, so he picked it. But really what that did was just kind of sealed in Tyson's advantage on that.
That's very true. And so the way the phases work, as we were just explaining, is each player picks one phase, beginning of every round. You have 5 phases, as Charles mentioned. You've got development, construction, action, production, and research.
Yeah.
And each phase acts differently, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more in strategy too, but basics of it mean that your development, you're going to be playing a green card. These are your free actions. Other than paying cash for them, they're early development.
I wouldn't really list them as a free action.
Free resource. They're your resource development.
It's infrastructure is what it is, right? So let's say that I build like a strip mine. It's going to provide me with, iron and coal and whatever I get out of a strip mine, right? That's what those development cards are for, is so that you can grow your business on Mars. Because frankly, Mars is a long ways away, right? It takes a lot of effort to take a trip up to Mars. And so you see that with a lot of these cards, is it's making yourself self-sustaining on the planet.
On the new planet.
Yeah, which is brilliant, frankly.
Again, everything from this, every aspect of this game is so well thought out. Your second phase is your construction. This is where you're going to start building your actions and your effects in the game mechanically. Thematically, you're really building like stoves and space exploration gear, and like you're really building things. That's why it's the construction phase.
Yeah. So when I think of construction phase, we're making the things that are actually doing the effort on Terraforming Mars. So
absolutely.
In the development phase, we're building up infrastructure that gives us the resources that we need to do larger projects. In the construction phase, we're using those resources to really make a difference on Mars itself. That's your chance to change Mars. Now, you did mention green cards. Did you say blue and red?
I haven't mentioned the colors on construction.
Yeah. So there's basically there's a couple different varieties of cards, but your main deck is called your project cards, and that's separated into 3 colors: green, blue, and red. So like Connor said, the green cards you're going to see in the development phase. Those are infrastructure cards. And then in your construction phase, that's going to have blue and red cards.
Yeah.
Blue cards are going to be kind of your efforts to make Mars different as a continual effort. Your red cards are going to be like one-time events. Like, right. I grabbed a comet that was passing by and pulled it down and collected, the water and trace minerals that were in it, right? That's a one-time thing. Your blue cards are going to be repeatables. Yeah.
And again, so well thought out. Your blue cards are anything from, as I was mentioning before, having a wood-burning stove that can continuously produce heat, to actual geothermal
or nuclear,
yeah,
or solar,
and even so far down as to create microbes to start creating new life on the planet Mars. such a well thought out game. I love this game. And with that, I think we're good to move on to phase 3. Or do you have more thoughts on construction?
Yeah, so the way that you're going to see a breakdown on those blue cards, they actually come in a couple different varieties. I think that's important to take note of as well. So like I said,
your actions and your effects.
Yeah, so like I said, the red cards are events, those are one-time use. And then your blue cards are split into 2 categories. They've got kind of a passive ability that you might see on some cards where if A happens, then do B, right? Pretty basic stuff.
Those are noted by the keyword effect.
Yes.
It is a causality. Something happens, so the card does something in return.
And then the other type of blue card are the action cards, the actual action cards. And in order to utilize those, you need phase 3. Phase 3 is the action phase, and in order to take actions on those blue cards, you got to take an action phase. That's I'm making concerted effort to do this thing right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, that pretty much covers phase 3. There's not much to go into as far as details on phase 3. It is the action phase.
Oh, you know what?
The only additional thing to mention is the base actions.
Yeah, sure. The base actions are pretty straightforward. You can plant forests to grow trees and increase the oxygen level. You can just
straight up increase the heat.
Yeah, raise the temperature of the planet. Not sure thematically what you're actually doing there, but maybe blowing up the ice caps, I guess. I don't know. I
mean, you could be, but again, like I mentioned before with the wood-burning stove, it produces heat.
That's true.
And then you're spending that heat as a resource to increase the temperature on the planet.
Which, mechanically wise, sure, it makes plenty of sense. I'm taking a step back and trying to think more about the kind of the overview of the game from a reality perspective. Like, if I got the stove, it should be passively raising the heat. I shouldn't have to intentionally raise the heat. Which is actually a good point, because one rule that we messed up in our playthrough is if you have the heat resources during an action phase, you have to spend them to raise the heat. That's not an option.
That is, that is not something that we actually paid attention to.
Same with plants. If you're growing a lot of plants, naturally it's going to raise the oxygen. The game does force you to produce those. The other standard action that you can take is to create oceans.
Right. And again, that just kind of naturally happens. The more the temperature increases, the more life exists on the planet, you're just going to start producing oceans and lakes and other aspects of the planet. And that's pretty much all there is to the action phase.
Let's back up just a little bit. Did you want to go over the bonuses for playing those phase cards?
Oh, that's probably fair.
Yes, you guys probably want to know about that.
So each phase, for whoever played that phase for the round, does get a specific bonus, which is kind of where we'll get a little bit more into strategy here in a few minutes. Choosing specific phases for the bonuses is actually a really good strategy point. The development phase allows you to lower the cost of a green card that you're playing during that phase by 3 mega credits.
Which doesn't sound like a whole lot early on.
It can be huge.
It makes a big difference. And even later on, if you're playing development phase pretty frequently as a group, saving that extra... It's
going to save you a lot of credits.
The construction phase, the bonus is you can actually play a second blue or red card, or you can draw a card.
Right.
You are allowed to draw that card before or after playing your initial card.
Which is an important clarification. And then as far as the action phase goes, your bonus is you get to activate an extra action from one of your cards an extra time. The base actions you can do as many times as possible as you have resources for, not necessarily as you want, because as you mentioned, if you have heat or plants, you have to do that.
But you don't have to spend credits to use actions.
Right.
Which is where the optional comes in.
Exactly.
But the blue cards, when you're running the action phase, you are allowed to activate each action on a card once. Every card gets activated once if you want it.
Right. And then that bonus allows you to activate one of those actions an additional time, which can make a huge difference. Again, if you caught our gameplay, Tyson takes very much.
Oh, yeah.
advantage of that.
I don't think Justin ever did take advantage of it, but he had an action card that let him produce an ocean for like
4 credits.
Like 4 credits. It was stupid cheap, and I mean, if he had played the action phase, much sooner,
I think he could have had a decent chance of winning.
2 oceans.
Yeah,
that's a
stupid steal, especially because during the action phase, the base cost of flipping an ocean is 15 credits.
Yeah, so half of that for 2 oceans, that's a good deal.
Yeah,
good deal.
That's crazy.
So phase 4.
Yes.
That is going to be production. That's where we really start taking advantage of those...
resource production.
That
resource development.
Those green cards that we've been throwing out in the development phase. What it's going to do is you're going to gain... Like I mentioned earlier, you're going to gain credits equal to your terraforming rating, which, like I said, is going to go up based on how much effort you put into terraforming Mars.
Absolutely.
In fact, it does go up every time you plant a forest, every time you create an ocean, every time you raise the temperature. That's going to raise that terraforming rating. So you're going to gain credits based on that, and then you're also going to gain credits based on your production tracker. So you might have something here on Mars that's producing, financial compensation, right?
Right.
And then you're also going to gain your production for your heat and for your plants. And then there is one more thing you can produce is you have the option to produce cards. So that's kind of like
you're producing extra projects.
Yeah,
that you have the option of funding.
Coming up with some good ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. You also have on your player board, which we'll get to here in just a second, steel and titanium production, which will lower the cost of certain other cards.
Now, the game does make a different... does verbally, well, I guess not in written, make a separation between those two from the rest of them.
From resources and capabilities.
Production and capabilities. So production is I am making heat. I'm producing heat. I'm producing credits, right?
Right.
Your capabilities, that's not something that stacks. That's just something that makes your life easier.
Right, because it's... Your capabilities, which are the steel and titanium I mentioned before, is basically determining how capable your company is at producing certain projects.
So let's say that I've got some really good equipment. Like I've got forklifts and I've got power tools.
Right.
That would kind of fall into the steel category. That's going to make it easier for me to produce buildings. It's going to be cheaper because I can get it done faster, easier, less effort.
Exactly.
Same thing for titanium. That's going to make it cheaper to produce anything with a space stack, right?
Yeah.
Those are fancy, high-end titanium alloy, kind of projects.
Exactly. And for this phase, for production, your bonus that you get is that you get an additional 4 mega credits, just for playing the card. Which, again, doesn't seem like a whole lot, but early game, that can make a huge difference.
And if you are struggling to get credit production like you were in our last game, it makes a big difference the whole game.
It can. It can make a huge difference.
You need those extra. If you're regularly pulling in 10 credits every production phase, that extra 4 is a big, big bonus.
Yes, absolutely. And then the last phase is the research phase. So this is where you are spending time to research and develop new projects that eventually will receive the funding and become part of your company.
Yeah, mechanically super easy. You draw 2 cards, you keep one of them.
Right. There are certain cards that you can play that change that phase for you, where you're either drawing or keeping extra cards. And then, as far as your bonus, you're actually drawing an extra 3 and keeping an extra 1. So in total, you're drawing 5 and keeping 2.
One important thing to keep in mind, the book does clarify, another thing that we had messed up in our playthrough, you are supposed to discard those face down. Anytime that you're discarding cards, face down.
Another important part of this phase is and it's not necessarily part of this phase, but part of the end phase in total.
Yeah, so there's 3 sections of the game. The middle section is running the phases.
Right.
So section 1 is you pick which phase you want. Section 2 is run the phases that everyone picked.
And then you've got an end. You've got an end phase to your turn. And if you have more than 10 cards in hand, you have to discard down to 10, and each card you discard will produce 3 mega credits, and you do have that option throughout the entire game. At any point, you can just discard cards out of your hand to produce mega credits, which is something else that we did not get right in our playthrough.
Correct. You can discard cards while you're selecting a phase. You can discard cards during the action phase.
Absolutely
whenever you want.
any point in the game.
Sell them for 3 credits whenever.
And before we move on to strategy, let's go over the game boards a little bit.
Oh yeah, no, that'd be a wonderful thing to look at.
Let's start with the actual playboard. So if you're watching via YouTube or video, you can see that this is a fairly simple game board, very well thought out. Along the outside edge here, you've got your TR tracker, as Charles mentioned earlier, your terraforming rating. Everybody does start at 5 because the government's just paying you to be on Mars, essentially, thematically.
You say, hey, we're going to go to Mars, we're going to terraform it. Government's like, all right, here's a grant.
Right. And as Charles mentioned earlier, for each ocean you flip, every time you raise the temperature or the oxygen, you're going to raise that terraforming rating, and that will calculate into your final victory points at the end of the game. Along the outside edge, as Charles was just pointing at, you do have on one side your heat rating, and then on the other side is your oxygen. And then each of these hexagons in the middle is where your ocean tiles are going to be played.
There are 9 of those.
9 oceans.
9 possible oceans.
That is one of the only resources that or one of the 9 ways to gain victory points, that it is just 9 of them. They go fast and they go hard.
Which is kind of unfortunate, because since you were forced to create heat and forests whenever you're able to, obviously people are going to be doing a little bit of heat and plant production throughout the game. It's natural. I guess you could have a playthrough where just nobody is producing them. But if you want your game to last forever, for whatever reason, those oceans are the only thing stopping you.
Yeah. So in order for the game to actually end, you have to do all 3 of the aspects on the game board.
Yep.
Your temperature has to be maxed out, your oxygen has to be maxed out, and all tiles have to be flipped.
So your temperature is going to max out at 8 degrees Celsius. It's a little cool, but definitely livable. Like you were saying, there's 9 oceans that we need on Mars to make it livable. And then your oxygen is going to cap off at 14%, which is pretty close to what we have here on Earth.
Right. Again, thematically, this game is very well thought out. Another aspect of the game board to pay attention to is that your oxygen and temperature bars are separated by different colors, and that actually plays in mechanically. Certain things can't be done without a certain temperature being reached before you play the card.
Let's say that I want to start a farm here on Mars, right? I've got to have oxygen, I've got to have heat. You can't, plant a farm in the tundra, right?
Right.
I mean, not that it necessarily would be a tundra because it's Mars, but tundra levels of temperature, right?
Yeah.
So it's got to be warm enough. You got to have enough oxygen. And then along the side here, you actually have these little cutouts where it's intended that we have these little phase marker tokens. I think we've noticed in most of the times that we played that these, while they look nice,
not used.
They're not very useful.
As the way they're not used in the way they're intended. They are very nice to look at. They are very nice for new players to keep track of the phases as each round happens to be played. But especially if you played the game more than once, it's not hard to look around the table and see what phases have been played and just keep track of it mentally. Maybe for younger players or, again, people who have never played the game.
I can't help but disagree with you.
Really?
Yeah, so rules is written, when you're playing a phase, when you're doing your phase selection, that phase card stays in front of your board the whole round.
Right.
How is it easier to flip tiles over and look at them than it is to glance around the table? Like, in theory, it should keep you on track on which phase is coming next. In reality, like, it's
not really a necessary part of the game.
It's extra effort, and 9 times out of 10, you're looking at the cards. The first time that we played through, we didn't really use the tiles.
Yeah, I think we used them for 3 rounds. and then we stopped.
Yeah, even this last time when we were doing our video playthrough, we really tried to utilize them, and it was halfway through the round almost every time that I realized we'd forgotten to flip them, and I'd quickly adjust them to the audience. They look nice. They are not useful.
That is fair. And I think that pretty much covers the player board, or the game board. So let's go ahead and move on to the player board.
Sure. So the player board here, you've got a few different elements to it. It's really separated into about 4 sections. Up top, you've got a quick run through. Like, you probably can't see it, but on the very top of the board, you got to run through what each of the phases are.
Very, very basic run through of what each of the phases go through.
It literally says phase 1, play green. Phase 2, play blue or red. Phase 3, actions. Phase 4, produce. Phase 5, draw. Right? Yeah. Super little easy reminders. Your next section are your production trackers. Now, like we were saying, you've got your mega credits, your cards, your heat, and your plants.
And for those of you that aren't watching by video and are actually listening by podcast, this game is so well designed that each one of the productions are actually colored differently. Your mega credits, your currency is colored yellow, as in gold. Your cards are colored blue, which I don't know if there's really a thematic reason for that.
For research.
That's fair.
Blue is your classic intelligence color.
That's fair. But it does help it stand out on the board. Your heat is set in red, and your plants are set in green.
On the right-hand side, you can track how much you actually have of each of those different items.
Yes.
So there's a huge section for you to see how many credits you have. There's a section for your heat and your plants. The way that you're going to track all of these is by using these cubes that they prepared for you.
Yeah, so the game comes with cubes in 3 different colors. They come in bronze, silver, and gold, representing 1, 5, and 10 of whatever unit they're representing respectively. It, again, super well thought out game idea. It's super easy to keep track of. It's super easy to see what you have on your board just at a simple glance because of the way that it's produced, because of the way it's designed.
And for anyone that's played, a few board games, the 1, 5, 10, super intuitive. Right, they're not trying to break the mold. You grab them, you know almost exactly what they're for immediately, and you are going to really utilize those here in your trackers to see how much you currently have. Back over on the actual production trackers, we do have specialized cubes for each player. They come in 4 different colors. You've got red, green, blue, and yellow.
Yep.
So if I'm the red player, I would have a red cube on my production tracker saying exactly where I'm at. These production trackers do go up to, they run from 0 to 9 initially, and there's a subsection to add 10, 20, or 30. So in theory, these production trackers are set for you to have 39
max
of any given resource.
If you can get up to 39 mega credits per turn, good job.
There is nothing in the game that costs 39 mega credits.
I know.
I think the most expensive one I saw was 35.
Yeah, like if you can manage to produce enough mega credits to cap out, or any of your production, any of your resources for that matter,
not necessarily.
If you can cap out on the board, good on ya.
I mean, could you imagine having 39 draw cards?
I'm not saying it's reasonable. I'm not even saying
it's not reasonable.
But I'm saying if you are capable of doing that during gameplay, have my kudos.
Right, that is better than 39 mega credits.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you are forced to sell those.
Discard for 3 each.
Forced to sell them back for 3 each.
That's true.
So that really caps you off at almost 120 mega credits per round. I mean, and if you're running the research phase, there's another few credits in there.
Yeah.
But then here's the other thing: is when your draw pile runs out, you're just shuffling the discard pile back in. That is a limitless resource.
That would be fantastic. Now, nobody has ever done that in our experience, by the way.
Now with the heat and plants, those are much more niche, since you can really only use them to create forests or raise the temperature of the planet. And once either of those are maxed out, those really become a moot resource. Now there's one exception to that. I think we'll talk about a little bit later. There's no reason to cap heat and plants.
That doesn't mean that there isn't a reason to play cards to increase your production, because those are a vital part of the game.
Under ideal circumstances, I think I'd probably try and stop it around 8. 8 is how much it costs to produce a forest. 8 is how much it costs to raise the temperature. That's normally where I try and stop it.
That's fair. So the next part of the board game are your capabilities, as Charles mentioned earlier. These are your steel and titanium. Steel is going to reduce the cost of cards with the little building tag on it, which looks like a little tent. And that's going to reduce those cards.
It kind of looks like a warehouse.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a warehouse.
It looks like a tent to me. You know, my perspective, it's fine.
When I think of other games with warehouses, they all make them look exactly like that. Exact same shape.
I'm
pretty sure it's a warehouse.
You can have your opinion.
I have my opinion.
So your steel production or your steel capability is going to reduce your cost of those building cards by 2, and your titanium each steel you have.
I've got 4 steel, 8 cost reduction on all building cards.
On all building cards. Your titanium capability is going to do very much similar, but the difference is it's going to reduce by 3 for each titanium you have. So if I've got 3 titanium, I'm reducing the cost of each space card by 9 mega credits.
Well, it does sound crazy, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Space cards tend to be more expensive than building cards.
Yeah, which thematically, again, makes sense. Because those space cards are really like rockets and satellites and stuff like that that's going to cost a lot of money to develop and actually send into space.
On the flip side, you do get better perks for them. So I think titanium is still a little bit better than steel.
It is totally worth it to go titanium.
And then the last thing you got on these game boards is right along the bottom, it tells you what your standard actions are. Like Connor was kind of saying, we've got our oceans, our heat, and our plants. The only way to flip an ocean is through mega credits or through special cards. But you can raise the temperature by either spending credits or heat. And you can build forests by spending credits or heat.
Or plant.
Or plants.
Yeah. You don't spend heat to produce plants, my guy.
Well, pretty sure if you burn a forest down and it grows back better. I think I've heard that one. Forest fires are a natural response towards wanting to grow healthy, I think.
I don't think that's how that
Fertilizer.
works. I don't think that's how that works.
90% sure.
All right, let's move on. So I think that pretty much covers game mechanics, or is there anything else we want to cover while we're on this topic?
Tags. We should probably let them know how tags work.
Oh, that's fair.
We talk about space, we talk about buildings.
Yeah.
Actually, do you want to just grab a card real fast? I think they probably won't be able to see it very well, but anyone that wants to zoom in,
yeah.
Kind of
so
showcase how that
I'll
works.
actually move this a little bit closer to the camera. Hopefully you can see that well. So
for those of you not watching, the card is broken down also into several sections. The very top of the card, you got the name and the cost in credits. And then along the left side, you've got the tags that tells you what kind of cards they are. So we've talked obviously a lot about building cards and space cards. Those are 2 different types of tags. There's also power cards. There's animal cards.
You got events and microbes.
Science. And each of them has their own unique little image to kind of showcase. So anyone that's watching, the card that Connor's showing up right now is a microbe card, right? It's got like bacteria as its little tag image.
There are other little bits that each card could have. For example, this specific card that I'm holding up is the Terragrades card. It is a microbe card, but it has a little circle on the right-hand side representing victory points.
Yeah.
Certain cards, not all of them, do represent victory points. This one in particular has a little star, which means it's a variable. Other cards produce 1 or 2 victory credits. Some even produce 3, but they are a set amount. This one in particular produces 1 victory point per 3 microbes on the card. And it is an action card to kind of give you an idea of those actions we were talking about earlier, that during the action phase, you just get to add 1 microbe to the card. Simple and plain.
Yep. And again, if you're running the action phase, that's 2 microbes if you want to double up this particular card.
Right. So with this particular card, say you run the action phase 3 times in a row, which
Well, you
so
can't, but
three times
over 5
as
rounds.
much as you're allowed to. So 3 times over 5 rounds, you're actually adding 6 microbes and adding 2 victory points to that card over 5 rounds, which is actually pretty good.
That is pretty nice. 6 victory points will go a long way towards victory.
2 victory points for 6 microbes.
2 victory points is a nice boon. I don't know if you'd necessarily want to focus your entire strategy around that, but if you've got other actions that you want to take during that action phase, definitely worth it to proc that often.
Right. And even if you aren't playing the action phase, say somebody else plays it, you're just getting a free microbe on there.
Mhm.
And so you could very reasonably have 4 microbes on there in 3 turns.
Yeah.
No, more than 3. Say you play the action phase twice.
Ideally, in 3 rounds, you could have 5. You could max out at 5.
Yeah.
But then over 4 rounds, you could hit that 6 that you were talking about.
Right. Instead of having to go over 5 turns, and that can scale pretty quick.
Speaking of victory points, so I know we mentioned the cards obviously just barely, and I know we mentioned the terraforming rating a little bit earlier.
Absolutely.
So at the end of the game, once our oxygen's topped off or heat's topped off, and we have those oceans, we're going to be checking for victory points. Obviously, whoever has the most victory points is going to win the game. The way you tally that is it is equal to your TR rating plus however many points you have on any cards that you played, plus you actually get an additional victory point for every forest that you plant.
Yes.
So that one's a double whammy. You get a victory point for the forest,
and you get a TR for increasing the oxygen.
Exactly, right. So that's a pretty good deal. I would take that. Now the oxygen bar is much smaller than the heat bar, so it's harder to take advantage of that. One last thing to just kind of mention. When you're flipping over those ocean tiles, each of them do come with a one-time perk as well. They are randomized, they are unique. It might give you an extra 2 cards, it might give you some extra credits just for flipping over that specific ocean.
Yeah. And as far as oceans go, like we mentioned earlier, so as far as winning conditions go, each one is limited, and you do have to finish all 3 in order to finish the game. So this is a good segue into strategy.
Yeah.
A good strategy to have as far as winning conditions is to focus on the ones that are smallest to biggest. So you could possibly focus on oceans and then focus on oxygen and then go to heat and take up as much of those resources as possible.
Now, I definitely see where you're coming from with it, and I don't initially disagree. But again, with those forests being a double whammy on your victory points, I think taking those first should be a top priority. Every time you raise the oxygen by growing a forest, that's 2 victory points. That's a great deal.
That's fair.
It's also easier to raise the oxygen to a plant forest than it is to flip an ocean. I'm not saying don't flip oceans. Definitely there's a lot of cards in the deck that will let you flip oceans. Don't ignore those. Like I had one card in our last playthrough that was like 17 credits or something like that, and I got to flip 2 ocean tiles.
Great
Deal. Take it every time. And then with that extra little perk, it is nice to flip oceans. Heat definitely is taking a backseat for me when it comes to running the main board.
I couldn't agree with you more there.
It's really weird because it's really easy to produce heat, and so like mentally it takes a backseat, but I think
just naturally,
naturally it comes a lot easier than the other two do.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. As far as other strategy goes, what do you have for the
credits?
People?
Yes. Don't skimp on credits. Every chance you get to develop infrastructure to produce credits, take it. You need those credits early, and you need them often.
Yes. You could think like, oh, I'll just raise my terraforming rating, and that's how I'll get my credits. But it's really hard to raise your terraforming rating without credits.
That's what I tried to do in our last game, and it was...
Yeah, I've tried that a couple of times too. It really just doesn't work. Like Charles said, early and often with the credits. If you can build your TR in the process, it will only snowball and make things even worse. Or better for you, worse for your opponents. But...
more severe.
There you go. But building those credits is an absolute must early game.
Yeah. I don't think that the heat and plants are necessarily a big deal early game. Like we said, anytime you have an opportunity to bump it a little bit, you don't have anything better to do, definitely increase your production on heat and plants. But
credits will do the same thing.
And cards.
Yes.
Any chance you get to produce cards, jump on it.
Yes, because cards. So, and here's the thing about credits. They are super important, but they are also not necessarily the easiest thing to produce, because there's not a whole lot of cards in my experience. My draw, other people have had it, but in my experience of playing, I have not had a lot of luck in drawing cards that produce credits, but you can discard cards to produce credits as well. And credits do the exact same job as heat and plant.
It's more expensive.
It is more expensive.
If I've got, 6 production on my credits and I've got 2 production on my heat, I'm going to be hitting the opportunity to raise the temperature through credits more often than I'm hitting it through spending heat.
Yeah. It makes so much more sense to focus on the credits
and cards.
Yeah. Producing cards is huge.
Number one priority with green cards, produce cards.
Yes.
Number 2, credits. There's not a lot of cards that produce, well, how to phrase this. There are more cards that produce heat than there are that produce plants. You, like I was saying with the double whammy for the victory points, you definitely want to take plants over heat. And as far as production goes, that's kind of my personal ranking for the strategy. Cards, credits, plants, heat, in that order.
That's fair. And as far as...
And titanium. Don't skip on titanium.
Don't ever skip on... Honestly, don't skip on either of the capabilities.
I'm just not impressed with most of the building cards. And most of them come relatively cheap anyways.
They can, but, obviously there's always more than one strategy that can be ran. Yeah. Our primary suggestion is cards and credits.
Yes.
That is probably the easiest way to run. If you want to try to run something a little different and maybe not fight over certain cards with your opponents, running those steel and titanium capabilities is, in the long run, the building cards are actually what end up producing extra heat. So every time you run production, if you're producing 16 heat, you're raising the heat twice every time you run the action phase.
And I'm just not super excited about raising heat. So here's the
main thing is that's how you win.
Eventually.
Not well, so yes and no. And the reason
is the last victory point that I'm worried about.
For you, maybe. For others, if you can't produce credits and you can increase the temperature and the oxygen and raise your TR, you're producing credits anyways.
Not saying ignore it. I'm just saying it's not a front runner for me.
Which is, again, we're trying to offer multiple strategy options. Which is
totally fair. Titanium. Keep in mind, you get 2. There's several cards that will give you 2 titanium. Right? Yeah, that's a super easy thing to produce. You get 2 titanium down. Let's say that you're running, for the sake of argument, you're running every phase this game, this round, right? Not going to happen, but we'll just imagine. Over the course, and let's say that you get to pick which phase, obviously, you're going to pick. So let's say that you pick the green phase, right? You get an extra 6 cost reduction from your titanium and an extra 3 cost reduction on 1 space production card, right? Yeah. So a 9 cost reduction on 1 production card. It's a pretty good deal. That's a good deal. Versus if you run the construction phase, you could potentially run 2 cards down.
Yeah.
So you don't get that extra 3 cost, but that is 12 points reduction because I'm buying 2 different space cards.
Right.
Versus production. How hard is it to raise your mega credit production versus raise your titanium? Can I get 2 titanium faster than I can get 6 credit production? The answer is yes. Yes, I can.
Well, yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is if you are frequently trying to purchase buildings and space cards, those capabilities, they come in clutch.
That's literally what I was just
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm disagreeing with you. I'm just emphasizing. I'm trying to paint a picture for the audience.
Oh, that's fair.
don't skimp on capabilities.
No.
You,
Don't ever
you
skip
need,
on capabilities.
you need production, you need cards, you need credits. Though that's going to come up a lot more often than using your capabilities. But just 2 titanium saves you so much effort on so many cards. Speaking of production and research, so if we're talking strategy, generally speaking, a lot of your opponents are going to want to be playing production and construction phases because in their mind, like, oh yeah, that's how I get stuff done. That's
get
how I
more
progress.
resources, build more things. Get more resources, build more things.
Now think about this. If I play production, I get a 3 cost credit on 1 green card.
Yeah.
If I play production, I get an extra 4 credits.
Yeah.
Financially, mathematically,
production makes
better.
more sense.
Yeah. So if you know your opponent is going to be playing production or is going to be playing development, you play production.
Absolutely.
You still get that green card down and you get compensated for it.
And that's a good point you just made. If you know what your opponents are going to be playing. So that's part of strategy too, is actually reading your opponents and being able to maybe try to guess what their next move is going to be and make your move accordingly.
Well, and here's the best part. Even if they didn't play development, you're still setting yourself up for a fantastic next round.
That's true.
Never ignore production. That is probably my number 1 suggestion for this game. Run production as often as you can.
Yeah. And Charles mentioned research when he started going off on his little discussion. Something I've thought about since our last playthrough, since our video playthrough, is really capitalizing on the research phase. Draw as many cards as you possibly can. And we've talked about that a little bit. Like, if you can produce cards during production phase, go for it. But if you can't, running research is actually a really good strategy. Running it early and running it often. Get as many cards in your hand as possible. Keep the ones you want to run. Discard everything else. Again, focusing on that credit production.
Don't go overboard. If you got the cards in hand that you really, really want, focus on production and get those cards out.
That's fair.
If you're feeling kind of meh on what's in your hand, run production and research every time.
And that's something I probably could have capitalized on in our playthrough, because I wasn't super happy with the cards in my hand, but I wasn't running research like I should have been. I did eventually end up with a card that allowed me to discard 3 cards in order to draw 3, or discard up to 3 cards and draw however many cards I discarded, but I wasn't getting the cards that I needed, and if I was, I didn't have the credits to produce them, which is why I say, especially if you're unhappy with your hand, run that research phase and run it as much as you need to.
Now, one more thing to think about mathematically with the research phase, kind of the same thing as development. If I run research, I get to keep an extra card. Let's say that I hate the card, I'm just going to discard it anyways. That's 3 credits. Still not as good as the production 4 credits.
But just as good as
development. So if you don't have anything better to do, definitely production and research. And if you know, so let's just say that you just barely play production, so now you have to pick the next phase, and you're trying to decide, okay, do I want to do research or do I want to do an action or development or whatever, right? If your opponent is not going to play research,
play it.
You need to play research, because that's 2 more cards you could potentially sell. That's 6 credits. That is better than production.
Yeah.
If your opponent is not going to play research, or is going to play research, then you playing research is only going to net you those 3 credits. So
yeah.
I think generally speaking, production is definitely better than research.
Yeah.
Do not ignore research.
Right.
We always ignore research, and it always shoots us in the foot.
Yeah, that's no joke. Especially if you know your opponent is going to play research and you do play that production phase, you're netting that same 6 credits.
3.
No, you're netting the 6 because you're drawing 1 from research and you're getting the 3.
4. Production. If you
not production.
Oh, you said development.
I meant development.
Okay,
I said production. I meant development.
Yeah.
So if you play development and your opponent is going to play research, you're still netting that 6 credits as if you had played the research phase.
It's like either you net 6 or you get a really, really good card that you definitely love them, you're going to play anyways.
Right.
Yeah. It's a good deal.
It is a great deal. Don't ignore combos either, though. That is another big strategy
Oh
point.
yeah.
Again, if you caught our playthrough, and if you didn't catch our playthrough, I know it's a couple hours long, but there's some good moments in there. Go back and watch it. Tyson has a really good combo going off. Granted, he's using microbes, and it's not something that we would necessarily recommend that you focus on.
That's actually something we probably should mention. There are a few cards that will let you stack resources on them as well. For the most part, they're either microbes or animals, and they're not too common. Now, running these kind of combo strategies, if you can get them to work, they work fantastic.
They work amazing. Again, Tyson has a really good engine. Like this is an engine builder game, and I think Tyson had the best engine build, which is why he won that game.
Really functional. It was built around actions.
Yeah, he every action phase he was adding and removing microbes from certain cards, and he had one card in particular that made that phase so effective for him. It was a card called the Assembly Line.
Yep.
And every action he ran during that phase, whether he played it or somebody else played it, he was also netting mega credits just for running actions.
Yeah, so I think he had 4 or 5 actions by the end of the game, and that is as good as if you choose to run production.
Or better.
Or better. So yeah, his engine was very functional. Now, the thing you need to watch out for, be very careful with combos in this game. Don't think that you're going into the game going to run a specific combo.
No.
If you don't draw the right cards, you're not getting your combo out. I rarely run animals and microbes for that exact reason. They are very uncommon cards. If my starting hand, I've got like 4 really good microbe cards, sure, I'll absolutely run a microbe deck or a microbe field.
Right.
Otherwise, if I've got one, it's going in the trash. Right. It's not.
Yes and no. I can see where you're coming from, but
if I have to wait 5 rounds to pick up my second microbe card, it's not worth it. I've got a lot better stuff I could be doing with my hand.
Maybe. But again, Tyson had cards that every action he was adding 2 microbes.
Because he got lucky with his draw. He was able to run a microbe combo.
Well, I'm just saying, like, a specific microbe card. Like, he had several cards that he was adding microbes to. But there was one card in particular, I don't remember the name of it, but every time he used his action, he could add or remove microbes from it, and every time he removed 3 microbes from it, he was just increasing oxygen, just because. And every time he added microbes to it, I think it was 2 microbes added.
No, so that's because he was running the action phase.
Oh, so he was running it twice.
Exactly.
So every time he ran the action phase, he was adding 2, and then the next time he could add 1 and remove. So every 2 action phases, he was raising the oxygen, which isn't a bad...
Which is good if that's what you want to do with your turn. So think about it like this. Over 2 turns, he's netting himself 1 TR, which TR is good. The question is, do I want to run this card over and over and over again and just gradually raise my TR, or do I want to run development or construction and put down a card that's going to raise my credits by 3?
You obviously have to pay attention to what's in your hand, what the game is, and
the reason
the way the game is going,
and the reason his engine was so efficient was
he was running so many action.
He
cards.
not only had that micro card that let him raise and reduce its own microbes. He had another card that said, add a microbe to every card that wants a microbe.
That's true.
So every action phase, he was giving himself 3 microbes on that card.
That's true.
So he was running it much, much more efficiently because he was able to pull off that combo.
Yeah.
In our last playthrough, I tried to run a combo that I thought looked really good.
The Jovian card.
The Jovian combo, and I got shot in the foot because I wasn't drawing what I needed. So that's really all I'm saying about his combos. Don't start the game thinking you're going to do a specific combo.
That's fair.
Unless it's set up and ready to go.
Yeah. Be flexible.
Yeah. So
be willing to adapt to the game.
If your opening hand is full of animal cards and you're like, this is raw, I'm going to do this, this is awesome, perfect, good for you. If you don't have a combo in your opening hand, start with the basic strategy, and as things develop, don't ignore potential combos.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And your business, your corporations will actually play into your strategy a little bit too.
Yeah.
Specifically, there is one corporation that we are both very fond of called Helion.
Personal favorite.
It is amazing. So this card every corporation starts you with base mega credits to start the game, and then Helion allows you to use heat as mega credits as well. So not only do you want to produce mega credits, but if you're not drawing those mega credits and you are producing cards that produce heat, you're still getting those mega credits anyways, and it is so nice.
Like I said earlier, I believe that heat is the easiest thing to raise production on.
I would have to agree with you.
And so if I'm running Helion and I've got 8 or 9 heat production and only 3 mega credit production,
you're still getting 12 mega credits.
I run a production phase. I've got my TR as well. That's over 20 credits.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it's heat, yeah, but it's 20
fantastic.
credits, and it's relatively easy to build.
It is such a nice corporation to draw.
The only drawback is it doesn't have a lot of starting credits.
That's true.
It's like 24, 26, something like that.
It's not a whole lot, whereas other corporations start with you...
like 40, 50.
Yeah, 40 or 50.
The really good effect corporations are going to have those lower credit starting.
Yeah, the game's got to be balanced. Yeah. The game has to be balanced.
They try to balance it, but...
Yeah.
I mean, with 24 credits, I can definitely play something out of my first hand for production and construction.
That's true.
Like I can get the production rolling with 24 credits.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Is there anything else for strategy that you've got in mind?
A little bit more on running the meta. Looking at your opponents. If you know that they want something, don't give it to them.
Yeah,
like, it sounds stupid and simple, but like, oh man, I really want to run this action, but Tyson's got this stupid good machine running.
Don't play the action phase if it's going to give your opponents the win.
Yeah, am I going to take the action phase so that I can increase the oxygen 1 level, and then Tyson gets to increase the oxygen and heat 1 level? No, what?
Right? It just doesn't make sense.
Setting yourself up for a net loss.
Exactly. It doesn't make sense for the cost benefit. Also part of playing the meta is, as I mentioned earlier, being able to read your opponents a little bit. And if you know, like, using that same example, if you know Tyson is looking to play action because he has such a good action engine, don't worry about playing action.
That's true. Yeah, you know action's coming up.
Exactly. Like, if you have actions you want to run, but somebody else is going to run the action cards.
Run production.
You can run production, you can run research, you can do something else that's going to net you more benefit. Like, if you have a great action card and you need to run it twice... Sure, but...
Don't give your opponents a foot up just because you wanted to do a little thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's pretty much the whole thing about the meta is pay attention and
be aware of their engines.
Run things that are going to benefit you and don't just focus on your board. Because if you just focus on your board and the cards you have, then you're going to end up repeating phases, and you could have spent that turn doing something more effective.
Other things to keep in mind, though. Let's say that I know Tyson is going to run the action phase, and I've got an action that I really want to run. However, I really don't want him to get his production in, and I wouldn't mind running my action twice. I know he's going to play action. I might as well play action too.
Yeah, there you go.
Get the bonus because it's good for you, and don't give them something... Again, pay attention to their engines. Let's say that he's got a much better production engine running than you do as well.
Yeah.
You might as well give yourself a little bit of a boost with that extra action.
That's actually a really good piece of advice.
Without giving him the extra round of actions.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about that at all, actually.
But yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. Like, if things are pretty even, try and spread the phases out so that you can benefit from the extra production and extra research. And if things are... clearly lopsided, just pay attention to what you need to do to make sure to curb your opponents.
Yeah. Okay.
Without shooting yourself in the foot.
Right. All right. I think that covers pretty much as far as everything as far as strategy goes that we've got in mind. So let's finish off. We're running a little over where we wanted to be. Let's start off with final thoughts and recommendations.
Would I recommend the game? Yes.
Absolutely.
Fantastic game.
This is a great game. It is beginner friendly. It is beautiful to look at. It is thematically and mechanically easy to learn and get behind. This game, I mean, if we were to rank it, I would easily have to give it an 8, 8.5.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. One thing to keep in mind, though, when you say beginner friendly, keep in mind this is a big box game. So when we say it's good for beginners, we're not saying, oh, I mean, Candyland has half a sheet of paper for rules, right?
I said beginner friendly, not child friendly.
I get
this
that.
is recommended for 14 years and older.
Or even Monopoly. Monopoly has a trifold rule section, right?
Oh, that's fair.
Big box games, you're going to see
this has a book
of rules. It's not like a book. It's like kind of a pamphlet.
It's probably
almost.
like 20 pages.
Yeah, probably about 20 pages. Just detailing the different things that you can do with every individual action and phase, making sure there's clarifications on anything. But
let me clarify what I was trying to say.
If you like boxed games,
right,
this is an easy game to pick up.
Yeah, and let me kind of clarify what I was trying to get at a little bit earlier. When I said beginner friendly, if you are familiar with the rules, it is super easy to have your friends sit down and explain it to them.
Oh, yeah.
And just get going. Like, it's not necessarily the easiest game if you are new to board games and you have nobody that's played it before. Sit down, read the entire book. If we're being honest, the rule book is a bit of a slog.
When I'm trying to teach new games to players, I have kind of 3 strategies based on the game. Option A, I sit down and read the rules to them because there's a lot of nuance. Option B, we sit down and do a practice round.
Mm-hmm.
Option C is to learn as you go. And I'm going to be honest, Terraforming Mars, it's a learn as you go game.
It is. You can very easily a learn as you go game, and
sit down with 2 brand new players. Say, all right, here's your starting hand. These are things you want to watch out for. These are how phases work. Let's jump into it. You'll pick it up very easy. If you mess up the first couple of phases or the first couple of rounds, it's not
the end of the world.
I mean, obviously, learning strategy is its own kind of thing.
That's something you do over several playthroughs.
Yeah. So, I mean, do I expect them to win the first time? No. Has it happened to me in games like this? Absolutely.
During our freaking playthrough video,
that's true. Yeah.
Tyson and Justin had never played this game. Charles and I have played this game 2 or 3 times, and Tyson beat us. Yeah, before that.
3 times before that.
And Tyson beat us as a brand new player.
I gave Tyson a quick verbal rundown of the basic rules, how phases work, how cards work.
Before we started recording.
Didn't talk anything about strategy. But yeah, I mean, we sat down, they picked it up within the first couple rounds. Like, you can see that...
You can see the wheels turning.
They put a lot of thought into what phase they wanted to pick every single round because they're like, but I think that...
And let's be honest, phase selection isn't that complicated.
But again, that's if you understand the strategy.
Right, I mean, we all did it. We all did that. Every one of us, at least one round, had some point in time where we took forever to choose our rounds.
Sometimes it's a real question.
That's true.
But when you sit down and break down the strategy after you played it a couple of times, it's easy to see run production.
Yeah.
Right?
Run production, run research, run development.
Yeah, if you don't know halfway through the previous round exactly what you want to do for the next round, production research.
Right. So, yeah, like as we were saying, like this game is
good game.
It's super intuitive. It is easy to pick up.
It's fun to play.
It is so much fun.
A lot of elements, but it's not overwhelming. Like there's a lot of things you can do, but it narrows you down to what's right in front of you, and it's easy to decide in the moment. Generally speaking, not an overwhelming game, but there's so much you can do with it.
Yeah.
Replayability, 10 out of 10.
Oh, absolutely. Again, we've played this several times, and it is a different game, and it is so fun every time we play it. Something I do want to mention, that on the box, it does say that it is a 60-minute playthrough. I don't... Unless you are very, very familiar with it, and you are every turn... Something that we do need to mention is... Rules as written, you're supposed to take every phase simultaneously.
Yes.
So that would cut down
to
a
clarify,
lot of the playtime.
When we say simultaneously, every player takes the phase at the same time, and then we move on to the next phase, and every player just play as fast as you can, basically.
Yes.
Some things to keep in mind, and obviously we're going to talk a little bit about playtime with other games as well. generally speaking, with box games like this, when you see a playtime, what you want to expect
It's plus or minus half hour.
No. So if you've got a couple, well, I mean, yes and no. If you've got a couple of experienced players that know what they're doing, they want to get through the game, 60 minutes, very realistic. Like Connor said, maybe a little bit faster than that. If you've got brand new players, you're running a full table, 4 people, a lot of people trying to figure out what it is they're actually doing, it could take easily twice that. I could see a game of this taking up to 3 hours if everyone is brand new and you're continually referencing the rules.
That's a fair that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, but that time expectation is listed as the minimum number of players. As long as they're experienced, it should take about this much time.
That's fair. And again, if you did catch our last video of the playthrough, it did take a couple of hours, but mostly because we were trying to keep it organized and take it one turn at a time so we could explain things as they were happening. But this game,
for
if
players,
everybody is experienced, this game could easily take an hour and stick to right around that time.
Yeah, definitely.
Earlier, we also mentioned it is for 1 to 4 players.
Yes.
So there are multiple variations of this game. The base variation is 2 to 4 players, and you're playing against each other.
Yep, seeing who can get the most victory points head to head.
Right. Other options, you can play cooperatively, where everybody is trying to work together. There's not really a victory point system at that point.
It's more of a timer.
Yeah.
You're trying to get through the game as quickly as possible. How quickly can we terraform Mars?
Exactly.
And then there's also a solo play option. It's basically the same concept. How quickly can I terraform Mars?
Yeah. So if you enjoy the game and you want to play by yourself, that is totally an option. And there's not a lot of big box games that actually have that option. So that is super nice.
Yeah.
And also having the co-op playthrough is a really good option for when you are playing with newer players who aren't really competitive and they're just learning to learn the rule set. Co-op is going to be a really good option there.
Absolutely.
Other final thoughts?
If you choose to try this out or if you've already played it, there are a couple other games that I would recommend. So
we're going to recommend games based on the type of game it is, the thematics behind it, different aspects of the game. Specifically, if you're looking for the engine builder type game, which personally I am a great fan of. I've only recently in the last 3-4 years have we experienced the engine builder mechanic. This is the second game that we were introduced to in that region. Wingspan is the first. Wingspan is a game about...
I think you bought Terraforming Mars before you bought Wingspan.
I don't think so.
No?
I might be wrong on that.
I think you're wrong.
I think I got Wingspan first.
All right.
But either way, Wingspan is another engine builder game. It's
really
about...
funny.
It is... Did you say funny?
It's so funny because it's about bird watching and it sounds like a stupid.
It sounds so ridiculous.
It does sound ridiculous, but again,
actually super fun.
If you play Terraforming Mars and you just love the feel of the engine builder, that is exactly how Wingspan plays. Like the concept behind it is kind of silly, but it's a really well designed game.
It is a super well designed game.
Wingspan is an easy game to replay over and over.
And another game that does have a solo play option where you actually run again. So instead of just running the game like you would with Terraforming Mars, the solo play on Wingspan actually has like an AI, but not like it's an artificial player that just plays against you based on whatever's happening in the game.
Exactly.
So that's another really fun game that I would recommend you check out, and we will definitely cover in a future video.
Oh, absolutely.
Who knows how long that'll be, but we'll definitely cover it.
Hopefully not long.
Right.
I would like to do Wingspan soon. One more game that you should check out, especially for local listeners. We have a game developer here in Idaho. He goes by Joe Mack. He's developed a game called Dungeon Allies.
Dungeon Allies is so fun.
Now, you have to understand something about engine builders. So anyone that's not played an engine builder before, what it basically comes down to is, I do this, and it's going to make it easier to do this and this and this later. And it's a game that really just ramps up if you focus on ramping it. Dungeon Allies, I would not call an engine builder. It's not an engine builder game, but
It does have engine builder mechanics.
exactly. If you enjoy the concept of getting ahead early and staying ahead because you are just doing the best job at production or development or whatever, Dungeon Allies is another game you should check out.
Something to keep in mind for Dungeon Allies and what kind of gives it a similar mechanical feel to an engine builder is resource management.
Yeah.
Each turn on Dungeon Allies, you have to choose a certain action, and you have 8 options, something like that, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, something like that.
And if you are specifically looking to build resources, you have to take certain actions, and then you use those resources to accomplish other accomplexments.
I mean, honestly, really
later
like
in the game.
Terraforming Mars, the players decide what phases you take in that game.
Yeah, that's a great
yeah.
great comparison. So again, not really an engine builder feel when you play it, but it does have components of the engine builder type.
If you really like that head-to-head mentality and I can do this to screw you over.
And resource management.
If you really love that in the game,
Dungeon Allies is highly recommended.
At least take a look at it.
Yeah.
It's a good game.
Another game by the same creator, actually, switching recommendation styles for a minute. If you're looking for something more
spacey,
in the
you want to go
thematic
space,
feel,
you're colonize, you want to control the universe.
Great game recommendation again by Joe Mack. Right, is a name called Argosy. And Charles can explain that game better than I can.
Yeah, no, I've definitely played it a couple more times than you. I think you've only played once.
If that.
Probably. But Argosy is... There's a couple of engine builder mechanics in it as well, but really the focus is getting out and trying to colonize as many planets as you can as fast as you can. There is a value point... Not value point.
Victory point?
Victory point, yeah. There's a victory point system in that game as well. And you collect victory points faster and faster the more planets you colonized. So it's like, terraforming Mars, but what if I was terraforming the whole solar system? That's kind of the concept behind Argosy.
Yeah, okay. And final recommendation we have for you today, again in the space theme, and honestly not a far reach from what Charles was just explaining with the Argosy, is Cosmic Encounter.
Oh, yeah.
Cosmic Encounter is a game about taking over planets in other people's solar systems. You play as an alien race that has their own abilities, and there are so many options as far as the races that you could play. And it's basically Risk. It's very similar to Risk. It's not a one-to-one comparison.
It's like a 1-to-5 comparison.
It's okay. Fair.
There's some Risk elements and definitely some of the mechanics pay a homage to Risk.
Right.
It is a very, very unique game. I've never seen anything like it.
But it is space themed, and you are taking your spaceships and you're trying to take over other planets. First person to take over 5 planets.
Yep. If you've conquered 5 planets from
outside of your own solar system, then you win the game. It's again very similar aspects to Risk, but also a very unique game. And each playthrough is so unique because there are so many different alien types. There are 3 different difficulties for the types of aliens that you can play. It is just a very well put together game for, I think, 2 to 6 players.
Yes.
And we
can... 2 to 5.
2 to 5. Maybe. But
it might be 6.
We might cover that, and we'll probably cover that in a future video.
Probably not as soon as Wingspan, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get around to it.
But definitely a recommended board game to check out if you're interested in that space feel. And I think that pretty much covers everything for today.
Yeah, no, it's a fun day.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us on this episode of the Escape the Board podcast. We hope you had as much fun as we did.
Don't forget to subscribe for more gaming adventures, and be sure to leave us a review if you enjoyed the show.
Until next time, keep rolling those dice and escaping boredom. And we'll see you on the next episode. See ya.
Do we want to record